Welcome to Pop Culture Addicts. Some of you may remember today's guest from his role as the possibly divine being, Jacob, on Lost. Or maybe as Lucifer himself in Supernatural. Or maybe you just recognize his voice as Jacob Seed from the video game Far Cry 5. But he's with us today to talk about some of his more recent work, some upcoming roles, and maybe just a little bit of some fan favorites. Let's welcome to the show, Mark Pellegrino.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for joining us. Really glad to have you here with us today.
Great to be here. Thanks.
All right, so let's start off by talking about American Rust. Now, from what we understand and what we've seen and what we like to call stalking, this isn't the first time. Research. I'm sorry. Yes, it's research.
We put the pretty bow of research on it, so it's not stalking.
It's not stalking. That's right. So this isn't your first time working with Dan Futterman. But did that earlier work help you lead to being cast as Virgil Poe? And then also, how would you describe Virgil as a man and a parent?
Firstly, if it did lead to me being cast as Virgil Poe, I'd say there's some serious issues between me and Dan Futterman. As you can see from watching Virgil. Maybe it did. I hope it did. I like when you work with people and sometime in the future they call you up to work again because they actually enjoyed working with you. I know I enjoyed working with him, not just on Capote, where he was the writer, Academy Award nominated writer for that great movie that I was so fortunate to be a part of. But I knew him back in the days when he was acting. We did a thing called The Class of 61. A Steven Spielberg pilot that never saw the light of day, about the West Point class of 1861. So it was a Civil War piece, very, very interesting piece that launched a lot of careers, even though it didn't go very far itself. But Virgil Poe I would describe him as a man-child. He's just a guy he's a guy in search of a party. He just wants to be free. And, the shackles and binds of adulthood are really not for him. And there's something about that to respect. What about that can we respect? His honesty. He's honest about it. He is what he is. He doesn't make any bones about being something else. And hopefully it will be at some point fun to watch him. It's probably hell to live with him, but fun to watch from the outside. And I think my stepdad was that guy. My stepdad was not fun to be with, but he had lots of friends who thought he was a very different person.
Different perception outside looking in. Sure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right.
In addition to American Rust, you also have a project coming up called Strangers in a Strange Land, which is directed by your wife, Tracy.
Yeah.
And she has some credits, you have acting credits. So what is the general premise of that film series, and when do we get to watch it?
That's a very good question. The premise is, miscommunication. It's what happens when people from different cultures collide and think they're communicating one thing, but they're actually communicating something else, and things go south. And the story, we came up with the story sort of on the fly because I do conventions all over the world. And she said, hey, why don't we get free travel to these places. Why don't we use that opportunity to film in the various places that we are? So we wrote, as some of us we sometimes commissioned friends to write short scripts for the places that we were at. So the place becomes a character in the story as well. And then we just shot it on the. She mostly shot it while I was working on a convention, and then I'd do catering and sometimes acted in it as well, and helped some stuff. But this thing has been in the can now for a while, meaning it's been finished. It had lots of issues with post-production, where post-production houses kept it for like a long time because they were working on it on the side as a favor to us. And so the thing was in post-production for about 2 years. And now Tracy's been busy with other things, but now it's about getting it out to film festivals. So, we started filming the doggone thing, I think, in 2013.
Oh, wow. My goodness.
Yeah. So it's completed. There's 10 films. called Strangers in a Strange Land. I think it's better than Je t'aime Paris. I think some of the films are actually like ridiculously good, and the actors in them are ridiculously good. And the fact that my wife was able to pull off this feat of creativity in different countries under crazy circumstances. Sometime in Brazil, they lost all of our equipment for 3 days.
Oh wow!
Oh my goodness.
And we had a tight schedule to shoot this film in Brazil for 5 days. So she shot the entire piece in 2.
Oh wow!
In Rio de Janeiro by herself on Copacabana. Okay, that's crazy.
That is impressive.
That's my wife. I'm like, Tracy, there's favelas right down there. See you walking around the street with a camera, and there's a kid. You know, you're a target. This is Rio de Janeiro. It's one of the most dangerous and beautiful places on the planet. She had no fear. She has no fear.
Awesome.
Wow.
Kudos.
Of course. One day into it, my jiu-jitsu teacher did come and visit us, and I did post him with her on one of the shoots.
There you go.
So,
of course, let people know she's defended.
Yes. He's a 6th degree black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, so he really knows his stuff. But when is it going to come out? I don't know. Hopefully in this next year. I'd love people to see it, because I'm getting old. By the time it comes out, I'm going to be all more wrinkly. I'm going to look very different from the guy in the film.
I am so going to use that line later. I'm not old. I'm just more wrinkly.
That's it.
It's a thing. It's going to be a thing.
I earn these wrinkles.
That's right.
Definitely.
So, a question that popped up in my head while you were talking about that. So you filmed in all these different places, even if it was just for short periods of time. Where was your favorite destination to do these short films at? Like, just maybe, because some people go, oh man, you got to film in Rio and because it's so beautiful, or but sometimes for me, the favorite things are the ones that aren't the expected. Was that the case in one of these?
It's difficult to say, because for me, you get so busy in the moment working on what you're working on that you're not really taking the time to sort of drink in the atmosphere.
Sure.
And I'm so busy. I was so busy in Rio working on the show, and then working on the convention, which was 9-10 hours at a pop at a pretty good pitch. It wasn't like normal conventions. And then coming home to sort of help her film. So my days were like 14, 15-hour days, and we saw stuff, because we did shots at places that were famous there, but I don't feel like I got to take them in as I would have liked to. But every place was so unique. I mean, I particularly like the stuff we did in Germany, because we found some crazy places there. Like, for example, there's a story that my character tells in there it's a fictional story about these two lovers that couldn't see eye to eye, and they fought, but then one of them dies and confesses his love at the very end, and she dies immediately after, and there's a tree buried over them that intertwines and becomes like two trees. I don't remember the exact story, but it was this beautiful story that I made up. I just made up this story, and our location scout over there found a tree exactly like that in the middle of the German forest. Cool. So it's like, how that person actually did it, I don't know, but it made the story really, really beautiful. And I liked that. Maybe because I wrote that particular story too, and seeing the actors sort of live out these speeches and me talk about love in an idyllic way. I don't know. I feel sort of drawn to that, and so maybe that's my favorite place.
That's all right. That's a fair answer.
Okay. It's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So, in addition to being an actor, you're also a teacher of acting as well. Now, we can't have great entertainment with actors and crew that makes shows and movies we love without having people who teach these things. So thank you for helping keeping the arts going. It helps keep putting people out in front of us who are we always find there's always that new actor that comes out, or the new writer or somebody along those lines who helps put something new from a new perspective. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the arts, is seeing the new things that people can come up with. But generally speaking, what is the best piece of advice that you give to aspiring actors? Somebody who's looking to reach out and become the next Mark Pellegrino.
Well, I'll tell you what, nobody in my class actually likes to hear the advice. Because anytime they ask me, it's usually coming from the point of view of, I want to be famous, and what's the fastest, most sweat-free, least conflicted way of doing it. In other words, they don't want any problem at all.
Yeah.
They want the magic pill, and there really is no magic pill. So what I tell them is, first of all, treat this like a craft. Compare yourself to other craftsmen and craftswomen and ask yourself, am I doing the work that this person does, the equivalent work that this person does to achieve a certain mastery of my craft? And I say, are you working like the brain surgeon did in medical school? Are you working like the painter did when they went to art school and studied with the masters?
Right.
Most actors will say no. Most actors won't devote, 6, 7, 8 hours a day to their craft when they're not working on their craft. Of course, you have to bring home the bread and onions. You got to keep the lights on. I've done 4 jobs simultaneously while rehearsing 3-4 times a day, and it's tough. It's not easy. And sometimes it doesn't end the way you'd like it to end. Does it ever? Because we all die. So I guess we don't all want that. So in the end, it never ends the way you want it to end. But it's really hard work. And I say, if you want to be the rock star, you got to do what the rock star does. What does the rock star do? They marry their guitar and they sit with it for 12 hours a day,
right,
until their fingers bleed, as Bryan Adams said in his song.
Mm-hmm.
So I say treat it like a craft, and then you have to have endurance, because this isn't a sprint; it's a marathon for real, and you have to emulate the actors like the Charles Bronsons and Kathy Bates. Sorry. You got to emulate the Kathy Bateses of the world, the Charles Bronsons of the world, not because Charles Bronson acted well, but because he was a 35-year overnight success. And Kathy Bates was doing great plays on Broadway before she became known to everybody when she did this breakout role 20 years or more into her acting profession. So
right.
That's the people you have to emulate. The Dustin Hoffmans, the Gene Hackmans, who got careers late in life, but or even Chris Cooper, who I worked with on Capote, who would say, whenever an actor asks me, what do I have to do to be an actor? He's like, you don't want to ask me that, because he would do regional theater and paint scenery and come on to the stage to do one line in a regional theater, and studied with Stella Adler, and it's very unromantic stuff, but he became great, and he is great.
Yeah, I think in the era in which we live, that there's a misconception that you can become famous overnight by doing virtually nothing. I think a lot of people forget that, the star baseball players, when you think of, home run hitters or people who have hit for average, I think a lot of guys like Tony Gwynn, who used to play for the San Diego Padres. He was a career, I think, 330 hitter, somewhere in there. I mean, bat over 300 for a career is amazing.
Yeah.
But the thing that kind of
and that's missing 70%.
Exactly. And he's still considered amazing for missing 70% of the time. Yeah. But the thing is that to have that 30% success rate, he just didn't walk out to the ballpark one day, pick up a baseball bat and say, I'm going to do this. It was years of hard work and dedication and practice, all the things that you were just talking about. It's not just, hey, I'm going to be an actor, or hey, I'm going to be a baseball player, or whatever it's going to be. There's got to be some work, put in behind whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, you have to. I remember talking to Frank Darabont about talent and what it takes to succeed. And I think he's a fantastic writer and director. And he said, Mark, the talent I have is that I have a talent for sitting my ass in the seat until it's done. That's my talent.
That's a talent.
It is really a talent. Just try writing and see. And I'm sure, and I don't know if you guys write, but I try, and just sitting there and getting it done is 99% of the battle.
I tried once. I I found I'm more of a talker than a writer. So for me, this is the easier thing.
Yeah.
My brain tends to, hey, look, a squirrel. I get distracted pretty easily. And so for me, writing is more difficult. Now, if it's more of an editorial style writing where I can just sit down and I can write my personal feelings and thoughts, I have no problem with that. But trying to build any type of, construct around something, world building, character building, anything like that, yeah, that's not going to happen. You're going to get, this is Bob, he likes shrimp. Move on.
It's hard. It's really hard.
But
you'd find that if you talk to any of the great writers out there, they will probably say, "Hey, look, the squirrel too," and that's what they have problems with that as well. It's amazing anything gets done in Hollywood because we're all ADHD and easily distracted, but somehow it all comes together to make really beautiful things sometimes.
So talking about honing your craft and working on your craft, there are some actors who it seems that they mold their roles around their own personalities, but you don't. Like, talking to you for the last 20 minutes, you are very different from Virgil on American Rust and Paul on Dexter, and definitely different than Lucifer. Like, I mean, those are huge personality shifts for you. So what do you do to help prepare yourself for those roles, especially where that character's been around for centuries, if not longer, so that you can be convincing as being them?
Well, luckily, for something like the Lucifer, for example, he comes tailor-made with a whole mythology that almost everybody knows, and you don't have to do any work around that. And people are just going to assume that in the narrative. Right? Like Brando would talk about how little you have to actually do because people who are sitting in the seats watching you, they're already suspending disbelief and they're in the moment. If the story is reasonably told, there aren't any glaring holes. People are just they're gonna accept what you do, mm-hmm. which is a marvelously generous and relaxed way of working. But with something like Lucifer, the story wasn't to me about a celestial being. It was about a jilted son, mm-hmm. Somebody who had been rejected by his family and was on the outside, always on the outside, unjustly on the outside, who wanted revenge and wanted to get back in. Mm-hmm. I think almost anybody can relate to that. At least me, I'm a geek. I could relate to that. I feel like I've always been on the outside.
Right.
And so even though Lucifer's extreme narcissism, if we can sit back and judge it now, let's call it mm-hmm. what it is. Lucifer said he was narcissistic. That may not be the way I would behave in real life, but I can motivate myself on the idea of getting revenge against somebody who's hurt me unjustly.
Right.
And I can relate to the family dynamics of a brother who bullies you and who doesn't take your side and the father who abandons you. All of that stuff is totally human and relatable. And even for a guy like Paul, what do I focus on for Paul? I mean, I focus on the fact that he's a guy trying to reunite his family, trying to do the right thing. So I try to find the virtue in the character that I can get behind that makes me not judge the character at all. Because you can't judge the character and then play it because you play a caricature, right? You play something artificial.
Right.
But you're right. None of those characters are anything like me, other than me trying to find those bits and pieces of justice and virtue that I can get behind.
Yeah, I can totally see that. That actually makes a lot of sense. And the Lucifer character is... I found him incredibly entertaining because you do get that different perspective on him. I mean, everybody knows his story. We're all taught his story growing up. But then you see it from his point of view with the, wait a minute, am I really siding with who I think I'm siding with right now? Like, that feels wrong.
Well, I mean, I hate to tell you, you've been sold a bill of goods by the culture. I mean, I do think Lucifer is a hero. I actually do. I know that sounds nutty to people today, but I considered Lucifer to be the first rebel against arbitrary authority. And I love that. I love when people stand up against arbitrary authority and tell it to take a hike. or have a mind of their own, which is what Lucifer says in the 5th season when he's trying to convince Sam to be the vessel. He's like, what was I condemned for? Having my own mind. That's something that you can get if you have a strong sense of individualism, a strong sense of human dignity, you can get behind that, and that's something anybody can. What? I'm rejected just for me, for thinking, for wanting what I want, for wanting to say no. I should be able to say no. Anybody should be able to say no. Why can't you you can't help but get behind that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think your feelings were just.
Okay, that's good. Hear it from Lucifer himself. I'm okay.
There you go. So when you look at characters like this, when you're playing these type of characters, do you take I don't want to say a special joy, but is it more exciting for you to be able to play a character that's outside of the realm of what you consider your own personality, because maybe of the challenge that is going to be involved and locking down that one piece of whatever it is that's going to sell the character?
I mean, there is a certain freedom to, like, in an anarchistic way, a certain freedom to playing a character that does anything he wants to do. And like Lucifer is totally inconsiderate of any consequences because they don't really affect him. There is something liberating in that. And I do enjoy it. My wife doesn't, because about a week or so before I go shoot, I become the practical joker on her and I play practical jokes, because I feel like Lucifer was sort of very similar to the trickster in a lot of ways in the latter seasons, sort of a broad, comedic guy, and who loved messing with people. So I would mess with my wife just sort of habitually, and she's like, I hate it when you go over there because you mess with me. And
he did kind of become the comedic relief in the show.
He did. He was, and I wasn't sure if I liked that at first, because season 5 Lucifer is funny in a very simple and understated way, but he's also very scary. Mm-hmm. He's scary. There's something regal about him and untouchable, but relatable and frightening and single-minded. And the Lucifer of later seasons was more of an impish guy, the guy on your shoulder messing with you and making your life tough because that's fun,
Right.
And then I came around to thinking, well, what do I think about evil? I think evil is really, in fact, powerless. Mm-hmm. I think it's parasitic and it depends on virtue for its existence. So, hey, why not make the bad guy little, like spiritually small? Yeah. Make him a jokester. Make him that way. That's okay. I prefer to laugh at Lucifer than be scared of Lucifer.
Okay.
I mean, Nick was scarier. I mean, once you got acclimated to the impish Lucifer, the real monster of Nick, the man who pursuing revenge at first, and then Lucifer, the connection with Lucifer, that a lot of people said was really, really scary, and I don't blame them for.
And I do find the human characters to be the scarier ones, because they're human. Like, that's possible in another human to see that level of scary. Whereas, like, you take Lucifer and you're like, but he's not human, so he's not as scary. But yeah, no, Nick was scary.
Nick is scary, and yeah, Nick didn't have Lucifer's sense of humor. By the end, Lucifer was just sort of sarcastic and witty and having fun with everybody, and Nick didn't have that.
No,
he didn't have a funny bone in his body.
It's like when you watch zombie movies and you realize that the zombies are not the bad guys.
Right? That's what's great about those, right? It's great commentary. Really is. Great commentary on society. The monsters are the people. Oh my God, what? It's true.
Yeah, well, you add a dash of narcissism and take away a sense of humor and feeling of self-importance, and
destroy any sort of social construct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get rid of civilization, and suddenly we're all crazy.
Now you have a monster on your hands.
And then there's Zombieland, so get to have some laughs.
That movie's just funny.
Yeah, I love that.
That movie's just funny.
So, we think about, some of those things we just mentioned, about the, add a dash of narcissism, take away the or the humor rather, and add in the self-importance, all that kind of stuff. And then we start looking at social media. Social media has become a huge part of our lives, and it's kind of the monster that lurks in the corner, because on the one hand, it allows us to stay connected to our friends. It helps us to meet new people and have these amazing opportunities for interchanges of thoughts and encouragements and all these things. And there's really a sense of global connectivity. But on the other hand, it also allows that monster in the corner to grow bullies and trolls and to follow their victims wherever, the world is going to take them. But I noticed that you were working on a project called the Guardian Project, and I'm very intrigued by this, because I'd like to hear your thoughts on this and why you think it's so important for people to learn the importance of how to stop online bullying and how to address it head on.
It's important because people's lives are ruined by it, literally ruined. And there's really nothing they can do about it. Like, I've noticed that I call it relational violence on social media, and it's very different than actual violence. Mm-hmm. In that when a bully approaches you in the street or in the playground, there's a modicum of courage that goes into the bully doing what he's doing, because he risks the threat of retaliatory force against him, and that's always a possibility. And that can serve to curb the bully's actions. Even if they start to do it, you can set them straight and they will leave you alone. The opposite is there's the opposite effect on social media. When you actually fight back, it's as if blood has been poured in the water and the sharks come. Sure. Everybody comes out of the woodworks to mob you. So I think it's important that we understand that, this is a real threat. People's lives are really ruined by it, and that the relational violence is a different beast and has to be dealt with differently. Now, I say this as a victim of these kinds of trolls, and as somebody who had the old playground mentality of, hey, you aren't going to lie about me and say crappy things about me and not get whacked back. I'm going to whack you back. I've lived the experience of how little that impresses them, because right. There are no consequences to what they do, so they're not afraid. Like anybody in a mob who is more inclined to throw that rock at somebody's head because he can melt back into the mob than facing that person face to face and dealing with them. So we're trying to come up with techniques that enable people who are the victims of this kind of relational violence to fight back without causing the kinds of mobs that wind up happening, and to give them some kind of material recourse. We want some legislation out there where people can take individuals to task. Mm-hmm. They can actually pin them and make them responsible for their behavior. Now, some of the worst offenders are minors. Some of the worst offenders are these kids under 18. They travel in packs, and they are like Lord of the Flies. They have no sense of context. They don't understand really the nature of what they're doing to other people. Mm-hmm. And they're actually making their reputations based on negative inputs, based on the terrible things that they're doing to people. So we're just trying to figure out ways of dealing with that. One of the ways is we want to do a documentary series, starting out with a documentary on the history of scapegoating and that has evolved into social media bullying, and offer solutions, and then become a platform where we can integrate various types of professions, psychological professions, legal professions, to help solve this problem and give people some connection to resources that can help them if they find themselves, in the middle of a mob onslaught.
I think that's great, because we, over here we call them keyboard warriors. The people who have, like you said, there's no recourse. Like you said, on the school playground, there's a possibility that as a bully, you might get popped back in the nose, for doing what you did or saying what you said. There's always that possibility, but there's that air of lack of responsibility when it comes to things online that, people can get on, because there's the keyboard, there's that sense of anonymity because they have a username that they can just go out there and say what they want to say and really inflict some pretty strong, hurt on somebody just by what they've typed, what they've said, and how they've said it. So yeah, and I think it's really good that there's an opportunity for people to learn maybe what not to do, but B, I love the thought that you said that something about legislation and getting some type of legislation out there where these people can be held accountable for what they're doing. I think that's very important and necessary.
Here's what I think. I mean, and I've said this before, and I don't know if it's out there in the discourse yet, in the ether. You can tell me if it is or not. I don't think that social media itself can be held responsible. I don't think the corporations themselves can be held responsible. They are, after all, mostly open platforms. Mm-hmm. But I do think if you're passing on bad information about somebody, if you're creating a narrative about somebody, to me, you become a content creator. You become a journalist in a sense,
sure,
with respect to somebody's reputation, and the degree to which you spread that libel and do damage to that person's life. You need to be held as accountable as a journalist who's writing for any newspaper who writes falsely. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need legislation to reflect that. Hopefully we can. Of course, the delicate balance is how do we preserve civil liberties and do that? How do we, I mean, I've talked about taking away anonymity. I'm a check mark. I think everybody should have, their identity known, and if it's a kid who happens to be online, there should be strict restraints against them and parental controls, and the parent should be responsible for the stuff their kid is putting online. The fact that they don't know what their kids are saying online is really disgusting to me. Mm-hmm. But they do, because I see enough of these kids saying terrible things to know their parents aren't paying attention. So, I mean, there needs to be those restraints, but while protecting, the civil liberties that we all love, and therein lies the rub. So hopefully we can do that.
Well, yeah, that's always going to be the challenge, right? Mm-hmm. Because in order to protect someone, I mean, there has to be a limit or a cap on what can be done, but then there also has to be a limit and a cap on what can be said. But how do you do that without taking away somebody's ability to have free speech, but at the same time, that free speech not infringing on somebody else's ability to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right on.
So, I applaud you guys. I think you guys you're doing an awesome project, and I wish it all the success. We see it often. Kathy and I are both part of another podcast that has a very large Facebook group attached to it, and we see it all the time with people coming in just because somebody likes this character in Star Trek but not this character, or this character in Star Wars and not this character, or whatever it might be, and these people take each other to task all the time, and we're some of the most, I think I've seen some of the most heinous remarks made about other people who would consider themselves fans of something just because somebody didn't agree with them. And it just
I wrote an article in Rolling Stone under my partner's name for the Guardian Project, and I'm going to write another one, I think, about whether or not celebrities will start shrugging social media off, and because the fandom, I mean, when you think about it, just a few decades ago, celebrities were remote from their fan base. Right. You were handled through, an organization, or their publicist, is put them in magazines, or, got articles written about them, but there was no direct contact like there is now through social media and through these conventions. But some of the fan bases become so toxic,
right?
They attack the celebrities. And that is a well that's going to run dry if you're not careful. And do you want it to? I mean, if you want it to run dry, keep attacking. But if you want access to celebrities and you want them to be open with you, and you want to exchange with them on a personal level, stop attacking them.
Right. If you want to tell them that you appreciate their work, then tell them that you appreciate their work. Don't tell them all of the things that you think that they did wrong. That's not. That's just basic human nature, that you should be nice to people.
I always found it interesting where people get attacked on social media for playing a character for the way it was written. They didn't write the character. All they did was they got hired to do a job. They did the job. I think of Ahmed Best with his role as Jar Jar Binks in Star Wars, and the vitriol that came at him from the fan base. Even Daisy Ridley with, Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Ta-da. But, you also have to look at that and go, it's a pretty toxic fan base too. And the way that people attack things. So, but yeah, so it's a challenging topic.
Yeah, with Supernatural, there's the shippers. I don't know if they have shippers in Star Wars, do they?
Yeah.
Okay, and people are just crazy about these unions between people, and they start their own little carnivorous groups that just attack anybody who doesn't think the same way that they do. Hey, man, I think that variety is the spice of life. That you like other characters and you can teach me the virtues of these other characters, man. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
It takes all of us to make the world go round.
Absolutely. One of the things that I love doing about our sci-fi podcast that Kathleen and I do together is that, we've had people come on and there have been things that I have not been a fan of, but I love being able to change my perspective based on how somebody else sees it. So there's been people come on and say, well, you need to go back and watch this movie from this perspective. And I tell you what, that can make all the difference in how you view something, is trying to see it from somebody else's standpoint instead of being stuck in the four walls in which you're allowing yourself to live. It can be pretty eye-opening.
I mean, that's what Atticus Finch taught us in To Kill a Mockingbird. Walk around in somebody else's shoes for a while. It's a virtue. It's good. It's good.
But then they banned To Kill a Mockingbird in schools, and we don't get to learn that anymore, apparently.
One of the most virtuous characters in American literature, and we don't get to see him.
Right.
We don't get to see him teach Scout that racism is a bad thing.
Right.
No.
Whatever.
I know. So, Mark, my husband has a serious YouTube addiction. So I quietly added this series called Reality Check to his subscriptions in hopes that he learns something beyond audio-video production, because I can only watch so many of those videos before I'm going to lose my mind. So what can you tell us about Reality Check, and what are your hopes for that project?
Wow, that's it's like they're like little philosophy bites. Mm-hmm. So philosophy is sort of my interest, and philosophy intersects with everything in life, of course. And so I'll take a controversial topic, something I don't think should be controversial, but sort of has become controversial, and I'll do a 3-minute ditty on what I think it really means. What there's what we're told it means, and here's what I think it really means. So that's the Reality Check, and I hope to bridge gaps between people. I think we've become intensely tribalistic. We've lost the sense of individualism that used to animate us to a degree, and I'm hoping to bridge the gaps between these tribes, and universalize these concepts again. Some of these concepts that I think have been decontextualized and are now trapped in sort of these tribe visions of what they are. Does that make sense?
It does.
I'm trying to say it without getting all political, because some of the ideas are political. A lot of the ideas are political, so I don't want to go there. And
yeah,
no, that's good.
But it is cool. I mean, I've watched a couple of them, and it is that, like, you sit there for a second with the, oh yeah, I can definitely see it from that perspective instead. Like, it is good. Yeah, it's good.
That's
for
good.
you.
Good. That's the idea.
You to see things from the other side.
I think so. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just going to say I'm a big fan of anything that can help make us think, and especially if it's something that helps us think outside the box. So that's a cool aspect of Reality Check and what you guys are doing with that. So.
Oh, good. Well, it's just me in my room with my iPad and a cheap mic, as you can probably tell if you listen to it on a big thing. The sound isn't that good. And then I give it to this awesome editor, and I put edits into like what I think should be in there. And sometimes she does her own thing, but it ends up coming out kind of funny and I think somewhat stimulating. And I think it makes its point. I'm glad you guys got some value out of it.
And they're short enough to stay within the attention span.
Right? Yeah, that's scary too, though, right? I mean, I'm finding myself the more I'm on social media, the more frayed my attention gets. Mm-hmm. like I'll sit with a book, and I love books, and I'll if I've been on social media for more than an hour in a day, it will be work to sit with a paragraph of a book, real work.
Yeah,
and that's scary, because I think social media, the downside of it is it's rewiring our brains.
You're not wrong.
Okay, good. I'm not wrong.
not at all. No,
You're not wrong. No.
we have all of this information at us, blasted at us constantly, and it's so easy to switch between social media platforms and get to the next thing and get to the next story that we don't sit and use our brains and read like at all. I totally see that happening. And
have you noticed film? When you watch film, it's a cut every second almost. There's a cut. So that when you see a film, even like Capote, just a few years ago, that sits in the silences, it sits in long shots and master shots and stays in one place. There's going to be a time when our brains won't be able to cope with that. It's too still. That's scary. Right. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
no, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. Right. It's so true though that it is rewiring our brains, and not for the better.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, we need things that keep moving. Stimulating, big flashing, popping noises, so.
I mean, I hate to say it, but should I say this? Yeah, okay, I'll say it. Why not? I mean, it was disturbing when my stepdaughter couldn't read Madame Bovary. Okay, now when she was in 9th grade, I think, because the prose was just too dense, and she's going to Columbia for psychology. All right, she's a smart kid and could not manage Madame Bovary. And so, and that's, I imagine this shift in the brain is why they're taking books like Madame Bovary away and replacing them with, I don't know, Twilight or something.
Dear
That's
God.
Definitely what our children should be reading.
Right. But I mean, reading Madame Bovary is a challenge, and just like reading anything from that era when people spoke and wrote differently, it's good for your brain. It exercises it. You need that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, in high school, we read Great Gatsby and Anthem and 1984 and Lord of the Flies.
Not anymore, you won't.
Not anymore.
No.
That's all of those are on the banned books list now.
Are they now? Really?
They might all be.
The Great Gatsby?
I don't know if Gatsby is, but Catcher in the Rye, 84.
Anthem would. I could see Anthem.
Anthem, I believe, is. To Kill a
Lord
Mockingbird.
Of the Flies is.
Lord of the Flies, I believe, is.
Scarlet Letter might be as well.
I believe Scarlet Letter is as well. Yeah. I was actually just looking at a list of that the other day. My daughter's a huge book nerd, and so we're always talking about books, and so she's absolutely disgusted that any books are banned. But the
concept of banned books just bothers me anyway.
Right, and that's why you and her get along.
Same here. Every idea needs to be out there on the table. That's how we learn and grow. You can't ban ideas, for crying out loud.
And if you don't like the book, you don't have to read it. It's
correct.
You walk away from it.
It's the same concept I'm trying to teach my daughter about food. You don't like that vegetable. That's fine. Don't eat it. Eat the other things on your plate. I don't care. As long as you eat something.
There you go.
And that should be the same thing with books. Read something. I don't care what you read. Just read a book.
Indeed.
But, Mark, we have enjoyed having you so much on the show today. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to find out more about your work and what you've got coming?
They can find me at Mark R. Pellegrino on Twitter. If they want some, crazy dialogue, I'm in the fray in Twitter. Or if they want something more benign, they can go to Mark Ross Pelle, MarkRossPelle on Instagram, and they can see me posting dog and cat pictures and posters for what I'm doing. Next, and hopefully there'll be a season 2 of American Rust. That's what I'm hoping for.
Excellent.
Definitely. We will make sure that we link both of those in our description so that our viewers can find you.
Thank you.
And we also want to remind everybody that subscribing is the single most important thing that you can do to ensure that we get more amazing guests like Mark Pellegrino here to have these great conversations with for you to be able to listen to. So please subscribe. It's going to help more than you can ever know. And be sure to go check out Mark on Twitter and Instagram. You'll be able to follow him and see his cat and dog pictures there. Those are lots of fun. But also, remember, kids, pop culture is all around you. And sometimes it influences everything we do, our decision-making, where we head, what we're doing, and why. So be sure to come back next week because we'll have your fix waiting for you right here on Pop Culture Addicts.
Thanks again, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a good day. On behalf of the rest of the hosts of the FSF Podcast, we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on a future episode, please contact us by means of Twitter or Instagram using the handle @FSFPodcast. Or go to www.fsfpodcast.com and click on the Contact Me link. Thanks again.